So we're going to start with the two videos, this middle one and this bottom one. This one's a little bit longer. It's about 13 minutes long, and this one's like under 3 minutes, okay? This is a good one to review, all right? So this would be something to go back to if you want to review, study before a test or a quiz. That's why that is included in here, but we don't need to watch this together. But I do want to watch this middle one and this bottom one together, because there are some things that I need to point out to you to make sure that you're getting, that you're understanding, okay? And then we'll finish class with you doing the 4 vocabulary words where you need to define it, historical context. So for the Sufis, you're not just going to type Sufis into Google. You're going to want to type Sufis definition, then Sufis historical context, right? And then these are your 5 connecting words, like words that you think are going to help you remember what the term Sufis means. And then you're going to grab an image off of Google Image, shrink it, resize it into this box. And you're going to do the same thing for the House of Wisdom. And you're going to do the same thing for Sultan and Caliphate. Okay? And that's what we're doing today. So without further ado, here we go. I think I already have this one open, if I'm not mistaken. No. It's always fun having so many things open. Oh, wait. No. Strike out. I'll just do it the hard way.
The religion of Islam significantly influenced knowledge-making in the greater Mediterranean and Western Asian world. Islamicate scholars, meaning people influenced by Islamic civilization, regardless of their religious views, gave us terms such as algebra, azimuth, algorithm, alcohol, alkali, and alembic. We'll dive into Islamic medicine and philosophers such as the great Persian polymath Ibn Sina in future episodes, but for now, let's explore the beginnings of Islamicate natural philosophy.
You're all familiar with Crash Course. This is not John Green, who we're used to from our other videos. This is actually his brother, Hank Green, and he tends to do most of the science stuff on Crash Course. Why is he doing this? Well, there's a lot of science in what we're studying about here and what has been brought to us in this golden age of the Abbasid Caliphate. So he talks very fast, which you all know, just like his brother does. So I'm going to stop it occasionally to make sure that you're digesting what he's saying.
Islamicate power expanded rapidly after the Prophet Muhammad's death in CE 632. What began as one vast Arab-governed state soon fractured into 2 spheres of political influence. A western one centered in southern Spain with a capital in Cordoba, and an eastern one including the great cities of northern Africa as well as Arabia and Mesopotamia. The Eastern Empire, the highly urbanized Abbasid Caliphate, existed in some form, increasingly fragmented, from 750 to 1517. The Abbasid Caliphate was a crossroads or trading zone for Persian, Indian, and Byzantine cultures, as well as for the religions of Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism. Many languages flourished across the Abbasid Caliphate, as they did in the Emirate of Cordoba. This blend of cultures and belief systems made early Islamicate science cosmopolitan, that is, generally inclusive in character. A high literacy rate, thanks to Islam's focus on the Quran, meant that many people, well, noblemen at least, could study natural philosophy texts. Further, Islam the religion called on its adherents to treat others as equals, helping make Islamicate knowledge production more egalitarian. And on
Right. So as I told you, he speaks very, very fast. Okay? So one of the things I want to show you here on this map, this is the Abbasid Caliphate. Okay? Now you had Islam that spread all through North Africa, including into Spain. But the Abbasid Caliphate, this is sort of where their borders were. Now, look at where it is geographically. One of the reasons what made this such an important caliphate, an important time period that referred to as the golden age of Islam, is because of its geography. All right, it is in the middle. It is sort of the crossroads of 3 continents: Africa, Europe, and Asia. All right, to sort of travel to all 3 of those, most roads had to go through the Middle East, through the Abbasid Caliphate. Okay, and then Baghdad is smack dab right in here. This is where the House of Wisdom is located, that we've talked about in the past. Okay, So yes, there were some trade routes that went directly from Asia to Europe. However, this was much more difficult to traverse the land this way. Most of the trade routes ran through Asia into Europe, which in effect connected China all the way over here in the east to the west of Europe and of course North Africa. So this was sort of the hotbed for trading. All right, so that was one of the reasons, and I just wanted to point that out to you guys geographically, what he was talking about, because they didn't really show a map in that video. And again, if everyone has a question, don't be afraid to speak up. All right, here we go. Oh, he said the words, I'm sorry, he said cosmopolitan and egalitarian. So it's the region was considered cosmopolitan. You can tell it's been a long day of talking, because it's inclusive. They really did a good job in including people from all walks of life in this area. It wasn't like, oh, we're Muslim, no Christians are welcome, no Jews are welcome. It wasn't like that at all. In fact, as long as you were a scholar, it was encouraged that you traveled to Baghdad, all right, and participated in the House of Wisdom. And because of the Islamic religion, sort of the nature of the Islamic religion, bringing in all this sort of knowledge and giving it to everybody in the Muslim community, it established what was called an egalitarian society, meaning that there was more equality among people. Egalitarian really is a way of saying equality. So if you live in an egalitarian society, we consider all people equal access to things, okay? And this was very much the picture of Islam during the Abbasid Caliphate's time, okay? I'm sure that's not the perception that many of you might have today that are not Islam or that are not Muslim, right? We tend to see this dominated by terrorist groups, radical fundamentalists, religious fundamentalists, who really aren't doing it for religious reasons. They're really doing it because of power. And the two terms you might be familiar with what Mr. Lee is saying is the group ISIS and the group Al-Qaeda. One is a Sunni, one is a Shiite. They're not really doing it out of, for religious reasons. They're really doing it for power. Who controls the area? And we're talking about modern day. So unfortunately, many of us in America, we're not brought up in that area. We don't really know the area's history. This is why Mr. Lee is teaching you, a portion of what this area is like. Because in America, we tend to think that the Muslim culture, and we hear the word Islam, and a lot of people, unfortunately, associate that with terrorism. And they associate that with ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And you have to realize, there's over 1.5 to 1.6 billion Muslims, okay? And your ISIS or Al-Qaeda factions are just a small sliver of that 1.6 billion people. However, it's certainly something that we have to contend with because, a small percentage of 1.6 billion is still a decent amount of people, okay? But we should understand the difference between the radical religious fundamentalists and actual peaceful Muslims. All right, here we go. By the way, I just said a lot. Any questions for me or concerns or suggestions or comments? No, I'm just that good at explaining things. Okay, here we go.
Ongoing support from pious philanthropists, including heads of states, allowed Islamic polymaths to study natural phenomena systematically. Baghdad, the first Abbasid capital, was founded by its second caliph, Al-Mansur, in 754. A sprawling metropolis quickly grew up around the original carefully planned city, and Baghdad became the largest urban area in the world by 930, with a population of 1 million. Key for our story today, Baghdad housed the Bait al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom. This great library grew out of Al-Mansur's private collection, which he opened up to visiting scholars, including delegations from India. Al-Mansur's successor, Caliph al-Rashid, carried on this tradition. Al-Rashid also supported the translation movement, which we'll get to shortly. But first, let's reflect on his rule as a great example of the cosmopolitan character of the early Abbasids. Charlemagne sent a mission from France to al-Rashid's court in 799 with gifts, so in 802, al-Rashid sent Charlemagne an embassy, including an elephant named Abu Abbas, and a water clock that featured clockwork knights who emerged once per hour. You could see the elephant's journey maybe as one origin of veterinary science. The Abbasid diplomats had to keep the elephant healthy walking from India to Baghdad to France, and it lived for years after in captivity, and to the Franks the water clock was simply mind-blowing, something that they'd never imagined. But it was al-Rashid's successor, Caliph al-Ma'mun, who in 832 refounded the House of Wisdom specifically as an international center for translation and research. Al-Ma'mun was involved in the house's daily operations, and he sponsored knowledge production programmatically, inspiring his successors to do the same. By 850, the House of Wisdom had become the largest library in the world. Al-Ma'mun sponsored families of scholar translators to bring useful texts into Arabic from Greek, Chinese, Sanskrit, Persian, and Syriac. This should maybe be known as the Useful Texts into Arabic movement, but for some reason it's called the Translation movement instead. This movement began with Persian texts concerning astrology and astronomy. Remember that across the ancient and medieval worlds, astronomy was the study of the heavens, and astrology was the study of the influence of heavenly bodies on earthly matters. While both were studied, astrology was seen as more useful. After texts about the stars, the translators moved on to others. To feed this program, Al-Ma'mun sent emissaries to collect Greek scientific manuscripts from the Byzantines and began demanding them as loot in war. The translation movement lasted from roughly 750 to 950 CE. By 950, virtually every Greek scholarly text had been translated multiple times and the libraries were brimming. Many translators of Baghdad particularly fell for the works of Aristotle. One of the greatest Islamic philosophers, Ibn Rushd, is sometimes called the commentator, meaning the #1 Aristotle fan. To this day, more classical Greek commentaries on Aristotle may be available in Arabic than English. Why was Caliph al-Ma'mun so into Persian and Greek science? For one, supporting translations was a sign of civic status and a worthy cause. Al-Ma'mun also saw scientific translation as highly practical. For example, a better understanding of astronomy led to more accurate official timekeeping for mosques and improved geographical knowledge, helping more accurately align prayers to Mecca. The translation movement also fostered a strong appreciation for reasoned thought, at least among the ruling and scholarly classes. This rubbed off on religious philosophy, giving rise to the school of Mu'tazilism. Mu'tazila, such as al-Ma'mun, believed that rationalism could be used to understand both the physical world and God. They brought the Greek tradition of reasoned debate about the nature of the cosmos into an Islamic social context, looking beyond a literal reading of the Quran for sources of knowledge. In fact, places of learning under the Abbasid Caliphate included observatories, hospitals, and public libraries, as well as mosques and madrasas.
All right, so again, lots of words there. All right, take a breath. I realize it, and these guys joke about it all the time. They're always like, look, I got to get 20 minutes of material in 10 minutes, right? So they really do talk very fast. And I never would expect you to learn everything that's happening in the video, which is why you always will have access to this video to rewatch it, to pick up more information. But what I really want you to get out of that whole segment there that we just watched uninterrupted. So this Abbasid Caliphate, this part in this time period in this Islamic golden age, right? They were obsessed, is fair to say, with knowledge. Okay, they were not afraid of it. They wanted it, particularly from the ancient classical, what we call the classical civilizations of Greece, of Rome, of India, of China. Okay, these ancient texts, they scoured for these things, invited, even to the point of going to the Byzantine Empire, which was Christian. Okay, and saying, look, we want the Greek text that you have. Sometimes they did it, politely. They would correspond, and other times in war they would just take them. Okay, but they would take these Greek texts and then translate them into Arabic. So obviously, when you do that, more people are going to be able to read because they don't speak Greek, right? We're going to see this happen in Europe later on in the Renaissance, where we're going to have people we're going to have monks who are the educated people at this time period in Europe are going to take Latin texts and translate them into the native language of where you are in Europe, and more people became educated because they now could read this stuff. We're going to learn about that with Martin Luther. So I don't want to get too far off this video, because you can see there's no period of history that really just exists in isolation. Everything has a ripple effect. Every time period affects other time periods, right? So the other cool thing to point out about this time period in Islam, which is very different than, unfortunately, how I think many of us perceive it today because of recent events in the world, okay, that Islam did not see, or people who practiced Islam, because Islam's the religion, the Muslims did not see Greek philosophy and astronomy and studies in medicine as a threat to their religion. In fact, they saw it as a way to explain God. Okay, so we're in another time period in history. The same exact time period in history in Europe. You're going through what's called the Dark Ages right now. Okay, so while this period of the Abbasid Caliphate, this Islamic golden age, is going through their period of enlightenment, Europe is dark. Okay, yeah, in some areas it still was light, but mostly in Europe, it was all about what does the Bible say? That's what we're going to do. Don't question anything else. The Bible says this, and this is the way it is. Okay, so there were Europeans at the time that might have been like, I'm not quite sure that the Earth is the center of the universe or the solar system. It might be the sun, that big, bright, orangey, yellowy thing that's in the sky. And of course, the Catholic Church was like, how dare you, take that back now, or we will arrest you. We will lock you away. Take it back. That's not true. All right. Clearly it says in our text that the earth is the center of the universe, right? Well, in this period of time in Islam, there were Arabic scientists that were looking at that and already saying, gee, I don't think the earth is the center of the solar system. I think it's the sun. So a lot of credit goes to Copernicus. We're gonna find in the Age of Enlightenment in Europe, with inventing the idea or coming up with the idea of what's called the heliocentric solar system, meaning that the sun is the center of the universe, not the earth. Or I keep saying universe. The sun is the center of the solar system, not the earth. Okay, and it's not that Copernicus didn't work on that and it didn't help improve that discovery, but where do you think Copernicus got that idea from? Anyone want to guess? Good old Copernicus in was it mid to late 1600s, early 1700s. Where do you think Copernicus got the idea that the sun was the center universe and not the earth? Oh, come on, somebody. Honors class, let's go. 8th period. Do I have to just call a name? Where did they get it? Where did he get it? Did he just dream it one night? Where might he have gotten the idea? Oh, I know, Mr. Lee. Go ahead, Mr. Lee. Well, he got it. Many historians believe, by the way, I can't prove it definitively. Many historians believe that he got it from reading Arab texts. And Copernicus was able to further the idea and prove that the sun was in fact the center of the solar system. And people even then didn't believe him. Again, threatened to lock him up and excommunicate him from the church. So then another dude came along you might have heard of, Galileo, who really confirmed the idea that the sun was indeed the center of the universe. And at that point, even the Catholic Church was like, dude, take it back. And had to live in squalor in prison in the end of his life because he wouldn't take it back. And it turns out they were all right, okay? So history, as I often say, doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And I didn't really say that. Mark Twain is credited with saying that. But look at what they've come up with here in this house of wisdom, in Baghdad, in this golden age of Islam. Observatories, so we can study the heavens. Hospitals, public libraries, mosques, this is a place of worship, and madrasas, which we're going to find out what a madras is. But this is like really, really sophisticated thinking for the 12 and 1300s. Okay, this is a great time to be alive. And if you are in this time period, you want to be living in this part of the world, probably not in Europe. Europe's going to go through their Renaissance in a couple hundred years.
Or Islamic colleges. Madrasas were critical centers of knowledge transmission. There were 30 in Baghdad in the 12th.
So he said madrasas were colleges. I know that was kind of cut off. So even the idea of, hey, let's educate our people. Here's an idea. You want to improve society? You want to improve our wealth? Educate the citizens. People come from around the world to attend our colleges. Okay? Seems like I'm talking about today in the United States. Oh, our universities, they're so prestigious. People come from all over to attend Harvard and Yale, Stanford, Notre Dame, University of the Arts. Woohoo! Now, this was happening in the 1200s and 1300s, dude. This is not a new idea.
1200s, and 150 in Damascus by 1500. Each madrasa had its own library full of paper books. Paper had been introduced to Western Asia from China, and paper factories appeared in Samarkand, Baghdad, Cairo, Morocco, and finally in Spain by 1150. While they were religious centers, madrasas were also places where students could learn law as well as Greek natural philosophy, including logic and arithmetic, astronomy, and astrology. Abbasid scholars didn't merely translate foreign writers. In translating the texts, these polymaths wrote commentaries on them, comparing, summarizing, and analyzing them. Even when motivated by utilitarian concerns, the work of careful reading and comparison led many scholars to pursue new questions in natural philosophy. For example, observatories arose throughout the Islamic world. Al-Mamun built 2 observatories, one in Baghdad and another outside Damascus. At these sites, scholars refined astronomical handbooks called Zij that helped fix prayer times. In fact, by the late 9th century, Islamic polymaths such as Abu Mashar, the famous Persian physician Al-Razi, who we'll meet again soon, and the Indian-influenced Al-Biruni were even proposing heliocentric models of the solar system. Their theories went against Aristotle, but with observed data. In geography,
You're going to find out that Aristotle, if you actually study Aristotle, was wrong about a lot of things. But let's cut the cat some break. He lived a very long time ago. But Aristotle was not the, at least in my opinion, it was not the end all be all. A lot of his stuff turned out to not be so correct. But he just went through all the different accomplishments there, right? Medicine, clockmaking, beginning polymaths, inventing a way to accurately track time. You know, we all take that for granted now. We have a watch, or it's now kept on our cell phones. Okay, these guys were figuring out because they wanted to actually, why? They wanted to get prayer time accurate. They have to pray 5 times a day. Okay, so there's technology helping their religion. So they weren't afraid of that. They weren't afraid of a technology going, oh, this disproves our whole religion. No, they're like, dude, we got to pray, and we all want to pray together, and we want to pray at the same times. We need to invent an object that measures time accurately all over this area so we all can get down and pray towards Mecca.
Islamic scholars extended Ptolemy's system. Our scientific hero today, Caliph al-Mamun, commissioned a measurement of Earth's circumference that was pretty amazing. 2 groups ventured into the desert, finding a specific location by following the stars. One group walked north and the other south, tracking the stars for 1 degree. They counted their paces. Then they walked back, remeasured, averaged the measurements, and multiplied by 360 to derive a circumference of 24,480 miles. The modern measurement? 24,901, less than 2% more accurate than the one made by Al-Mamun's team. And
Isn't that insane? Could you imagine that? By taking two groups of people walking in opposite directions, counting your paces, and navigating by the stars, and then coming back, averaging the steps out, and multiplying by 360. Okay? They were fairly insanely accurate to the actual circumference of the Earth. That's the kind of thinking that was going on in this time period. That is incredible. Think about that. That would be amazing to do right now, let alone in the 1200s.
Don't get me started on astrolabes, you know, mechanical devices used for measuring incline by astronomers and navigators to determine the position of celestial bodies in the night sky, the ones Islamic astronomers improved on by adding the azimuth or direction of compass bearing, and then merged with the armillary spheres or models of the entire cosmos constructed from rings and hoops that revolved around their axes around 900 CE, and then improved into geared mechanical astrolabes in 1235? I'm looking at you, Abu Bakr of Isfahan. Meanwhile, back at the House of Wisdom, in addition to translation and improvement on Greek natural philosophy, scholars were also innovating in new realms. In mathematics, medieval Islamic scholars focused on arithmetic and algebra. They adopted the number 0 and the Arabic decimal-style numerals from India, using them so much that they became known to us as Arabic. They also
Okay, so the number system we use today, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, has its roots in India. The Arabic nations are the ones who really perfected it, and we use it here today. Every day of our lives, we're using Arabic numerals as we write them. Oh, and also you can thank the golden age of Islam for you guys having to take algebra.
Developed trigonometry. One example of this work jumps out in particular. In 820 at the house, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi wrote Kitab al-Jabr, or the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing, an original manual of practical math. Al-Khwarizmi wasn't the first to work on algebra, but he set out general rules for solving equations that were highly influential for centuries. Algebra introduced a theory that treated rational numbers, irrational numbers, geometrical magnitudes, all numbers as similar objects ready to be manipulated. Or as my dude himself says it, when I consider what people generally want in calculating, I found that it always is a number. Mic drop. This opened up the possibility of exploring new areas of mathematics, such as algorithms, quadratic equations, and polynomial equations. Also at the House of Wisdom, thinkers such as Muhammad Musa were working on the basic laws of physics. Others focused on optics, and doctors and philosophers trained in traded works. But what about the engineers? The scholars working on the techne instead of the episteme. The Abbasid state privileged public service and the interest of the state, focusing on improving useful arts such as hydraulic engineering and agricultural science. The Abbasids used the arch rather than the Greek post and lintel system, and they constructed large dams, water wheels, and qanats, or underground channels to tap groundwater. Abbasid technology thus resembled that of the Romans, with craftspeople, not scholars, typically building actual stuff. But a few standout engineers from this time period created wonders so wondrous that they deserve a little attention from the thought bubble. In 850 at the House of Wisdom, the Banu Musa brothers, Muhammad, just mentioned, and Ahmad and Hassan, wrote the Book of Ingenious Devices, a compendium of 100 devices and how to use them. This included the earliest programmable machine, the instrument that plays by itself. Medieval automation? What? And it gets cooler. In 1206, far from Baghdad in what is now Diyarbakir, Turkey, the polymath Al-Jazari wrote an even more amazing book on machines, the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, which also covers 100 machines with instructions on how to build them. Most of these are trick vessels, but others include water wheels, water mills, a giant water clock, elephant and castle-shaped clocks, fountains, improving upon designs by the Banu Musas, a candle clock, and musical automata. Al-Jazari even designed a water-powered, perpetually playing flute. How did these devices work? Well, it helped that Al-Jazari invented the camshaft, which would make it into Europe by the 1300s, an early version of the crankshaft and the segmental gear. You can look up how these work online, but the point is, our modern world runs on them, and this guy figured them out in medieval times. That is dang cool. But the cool—
So like really, I'll just to put a finer point on that, the camshaft, I mean, you know, we don't drive in cars and buses and things. That's what power is, what helps motors turn. Okay? Like again, in the 1200s. We don't think we realize how much, and you know, unfortunately, you guys, and this is not a criticism, but really have not in your 8 years or 9 years of education in history really get exposed to knowing that a lot of the stuff came from this time period in this area of the world. So I just think it's important to really to kind of impress upon you a lot of the technologies that we enjoy today really do come from this time period. It's pretty amazing.
The coolest of Al-Jazari's inventions were his full-on automata, medieval robots. He made humanoid machines, including one that could serve water or tea. He made a flushing toilet with a nearby servant who refilled the basin when flushed. And the pièce de résistance.
Just by the way, that had to be an awful job. Yeah, what do you do for a living? I refill the toilets after they flush. But someone had to do it, I guess.
Al-Jazari constructed a 4-piece robot band that floated on a lake entertaining party guests. The music? Most likely programmable, using tiny pegs and levers. Thanks, Thought Bubble. We could spend several more episodes on science in the early Islamic world, and we will come back to some of the people and themes mentioned today. There's a common understanding of the history of medieval Eurasia and North Africa, long held by many English speakers, that's just plain wrong. Instead of a dark age defined by conflict between Muslims and Christians who didn't understand one another, we encounter urban centers of trade and knowledge exchange populated by natural philosophers with a keen desire to build upon earlier insights regardless of their origins. Next time, we'll build many—
All right, awesome. I know that was a lot of information, but I hope for sure that you are more informed now of what came out of this golden age. We're going to wrap up class today with this very quick video on the difference between Sunni and Shia. And it's really going to also help drive the point home that unfortunately today we think a lot of, when we hear the word Islam or Muslim, we think of terrorism because of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Okay, and yes, they are a threat, and yes, it is something that we have to deal with and take seriously, but we do need to be careful that we are not lumping in everyone that's a Muslim with that. Because you know what, in our past, we've had groups that have been terrorist groups that are Christian. One group I can think of off the top of my head is the KKK. These are Christians. Now, I'm sure people who are Christians would never associate themselves with the KKK. But the KKK do what they do in the name of Christianity. All right? So the same would apply in the Muslim world. Okay? Yes, these people, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, are Muslims, and they claim to do things in the name of Allah in Islam, but they really don't practice the religion. They just kind of use it as an excuse for power. Very short video.
The terms Sunnis and Shiites get thrown around a lot when discussing Middle Eastern conflicts. And sometimes it's useful, but most of the time it feels like it's just shorthand for these people hate each other. But with over 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, there's no way they can all be involved in some Hatfields and McCoy-style blood feud. So what's really going on here? Well, first of all, not all Sunnis and Shiites are at war with each other. There are tons of places where they coexist peacefully, like the United Arab Emirates, or Dearborn, Michigan, for example. It's also worth noting that their religions aren't diametrically opposed. In fact, the Sunni-Shiite conflict isn't even really about religion, it's about power. Originally, Muslims were all one group, unified under the Prophet Muhammad. Then, in the year 632, Muhammad died, and Muslims split off into two separate groups. The Sunnis wanted Muhammad's successor to be chosen by his community of followers, while the Shiites wanted the leadership to stay within the Prophet's family. The Sunnis were in the majority, so they chose their new leader to be the Caliph, which is basically the head of state. The Shiites did not recognize this new leader, and instead, they chose Muhammad's son-in-law Ali as their new imam, which also basically means head of state. That was the main source of divide, and from there, things really only got worse. Early on, most of the Shiite imams met violent ends at the hands of the stronger Sunni caliphs, including Imam Ali's son, Hussein, whose beheading is still considered a major holiday for Shiite Muslims. Today, there are numerous Sunni and Shiite militant groups, terrorist organizations, and oppressive governments. Being Sunni or Shiite doesn't necessarily make you a member or even a supporter of those groups, but they're still divided up that way. In fact, every nation with Sunni-Shiite conflicts has large militant groups on both sides, and they all have a history of oppressing one another depending on who's currently in power. Iraq, for example, was run by an oppressive Shiite regime before Saddam, then an oppressive Sunni regime under Saddam, followed by an oppressive Shiite regime once again after Saddam left power. Now the oppressive Sunni militant group ISIS is threatening to take over huge parts of the country. So you can see that the Sunni-Shiite conflicts are more about power, politics, and retribution than actual religion. And truthfully, the words Sunni and Shiite aren't even the best words to use when discussing Sunni-Shiite conflicts. They are way too general. If you're talking about militant jihadists or terrorist networks, but what you really mean is ISIS or Al-Qaeda, just say ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Otherwise, you're including billions of people who aren't even involved and most likely don't share the beliefs of those fringe organizations. If you'd like to learn more interesting information about the world, click now to see our video about the lethal injection debate.
All right, cool. We all still with me?
Yeah.
You learned something today.
Yeah, maybe.
What do you mean, maybe? You darn right did. Michaela. I think that was Michaela. It's okay. These videos are still up. I'm sure you can watch them again. And this whole class has been recorded. So if you missed anything, that's that. You can go back and do it. Now, I know we didn't write anything today. I felt it important to really get into the videos. So on your own, what I'd like you to do between now and Thursday, and a good student would finish this thing today, either right after we get off today or do it tonight. I want you to fill out the 2 previous slides of the 4 vocabulary words. It should take you like 10 minutes to do. Okay, so yes, I don't really give homework in this class ever. Once in a while, it's just a quick finish up something that we didn't get done in class time today. So as an honors class, I want you guys on your own. You can do those 4 vocabulary words, because when we come back on Thursday, we are going to be moving on out of Islam and moving on into India. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. I will check in again with you all tomorrow for class, just to do attendance. And of course, you're going to be doing current event tomorrow. And you will finish up your 4 vocabulary words from today. And then I'll see everybody tomorrow in the Zoom. Any questions for me? If not, yoo-hoo, we get to end 2 minutes early. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Later, Gator. Yes, I'm in the dark. It's all right. You awake, Michaela?